All right, so today's video is about how to do the week 4 spiral review. And remember, you can use this for week 4, week 5, week 6. And for this set, we're actually going to also use it for week 7. So let's start with the first question. Find the value of 5 plus 24 divided by 6 times 4. So I'm going to write that problem down first. I'm going to write it 5 plus 24 divided by 6 times 4. Divided by 6 times 4. So in order to solve any type of long math problem, you have to be following the order of operations, which is called PEMDAS. And many teachers talk about it as far as, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So we have to do parentheses first, then we have to do exponents, then we have to do multiplication and division, and then we have to do addition and subtraction. And multiplication and division, we do in order from left to right, and addition and subtraction, we do in order from left to right. So when I'm following the order of operations, I have to go with the very first letter and work my way down and make sure I do it in this order. So the first letter is P for parentheses, but I don't have any parentheses in this problem, so I don't need to do that. Next is E for exponents. I don't have any exponents in this problem, so again, I can skip that step. The next step is multiplication and division, and we have to solve that from left to right, which means multiplication does not always come first. Sometimes division might come first, so these are interchangeable. It's whichever one comes first in the problem. And in this problem, the division came first, so I have to do that first. So I'm going to start by doing 24 divided by 6, which gives me 4. And then I'm going to bring down everything that I have not done yet. So I already did the 24 divided by 6, so now I'm going to bring down the 5, the 4, and the times 4. And so now I look to see, do I have any more multiplication and division? And I see that I have some multiplication here, so I have to do that next, which gives me 16. So I finished that step, and I'm going to bring down what I haven't done. And then what I have left is 5 plus 16. So I've done all the multiplication and division. So the last step is just to do addition and subtraction from left to right. And this is the only step left, which means this is my final step, which gives me 21. All right, question number 2. Question number 2 says, what is 0 and 151 thousandths rounded to the nearest hundredth? And the hint is that the hundredth place is 2 places behind the decimal. So I'm going to write 0 and 151 thousandths down. So I'm writing 0 and 151 thousandths, and I'm rounding it to the nearest hundredth. So I'm going to start by finding which number is in the hundredths place. So the number that's in the hundredths place is the 5, because it's 2 places behind the decimal. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what's behind that number. So what's behind the number is 1. So the 1 is going to tell me to either round the number up to the next number, or it's going to tell me to stay the same. Because it's a 1, it means it should stay the same. So that 5 should remain a 5. I'm going to keep all the numbers that are in front, and then whatever is behind, I'm going to drop. And so then my answer becomes 15 hundredths. All right, number 3. What is the product when 842 is multiplied by 24? So I'm going to solve this using the standard method. So 842 times 24. So 842 times 24. So I'm going to line my numbers up, and then I'm going to start my multiplication. I'm going to multiply the 4 by every single number on top, starting with the ones place and working my way over. So 4 times 2 gives me 8. 4 times 4 gives me 16. Bring down the 1, carry the 6. 4 times 8 gives me 32, plus 1 gives me 33. And then I'm done with the 4. So now I'm going to start by doing the 2 times every number on top, but the 2 is in the tens place, which means I need a placeholder. So I have my placeholder, and now I'm going to do 2 times each number. So I'm going to do 2 times 2, which gives me 4, 2 times 4, which gives me 8, 2 times 8, which gives me 16, and then I'm going to add them together. 8 plus 0 gives me 8, 6 plus 4 gives me 10, carry the 1, 8 plus 3 is 11, plus 1 more is 12, carry the 1. 6 plus 3 is 9, plus 1 more is 10, carry the 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. So then I get 20,208. So now let's look at number 4. So number 4 says, find the area of the triangle below. So we know for any triangle, we have to use the formula base times height divided by 2. And they've given us the base and they've given us the height. So I'm going to set this up by starting with my formula, base times height divided by 2. My base is 5 and my height is 8. And then I divide by 2. So I'm going to do 8 times 5 first, which gives me 40. And then 40 divided by 2 gives me 20. So my answer will be 20, and my unit for this one is, they didn't give me any, so we're just leave it at 20 square units. All right, number 5 says, a rectangular tablecloth, so that's important, it's a shape, has a length of 25 inches, a width of 48 inches. How many square inches of fabric is needed to make the tablecloth? Anytime they're asking us to find how many square inches or square centimeters or square feet, that basically means they want you to find the area. So I've got to find the area of this tablecloth, and they've told me that the shape is rectangular, which means it's a rectangle. So for number 5, I have to find the area by multiplying the length, which is 25, by the width, which is 48. So my length is 25. So I'm going to do length times width. My length is 25 times my width, which is 48. And then when I multiply those together, and I can use my calculator for this problem because it's an area problem, I'm going to actually multiply those together on my calculator, and that gives me 1,200. And then because it's inches, it'll be 1,200 inches squared. All right, so let's go to number 6. So number 6 says, Carla and Megan are growing plants for a science experiment. For the first measurement, Carla's plant grew 5/6 of an inch. Megan's plant grew 3/4 of an inch. How much more did Carla's plant grow than Megan's? So I'm trying to see how much more did Carla's plant grow than Megan's. Well, first off, if they're asking me how much more, then that's telling me that Carla's plant had to be bigger than Megan's. And I'm trying to figure out how much bigger her plant is than Megan's. So if I want to know how much more her plant grew than the other person, then what I'm doing is I'm looking at the difference. So if I drew a diagram, one for Carla and one for Megan, if I drew a little plant, so this is Carla's plant. And then I need another one for Megan. And then here's Megan's plant. So Megan's plant Carla's plant grew here, and Megan's plant grew here. And I want to know what's the difference between the two. So to find that, I'm going to have to basically subtract. So I need to see, well, how big was Carla's plant? Well, they tell me that Carla's plant grew 5/6 of an inch, and Megan's grew 3/4. So I'm going to start with Carla's plant at 5/6 minus Megan's plant at 3/4. They do not have the same denominator, so I have to get a common denominator. So I need to look at the multiples of 6. So I need to skip count by 6s. 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. And then I need to skip count by 4, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. I'm looking for the number they have in common, which is 12. So that means 12 is my common denominator. Once I know my common denominator, I need to get an equivalent fraction. So I need to see, well, how did I get from a denominator of 6 to 12? Well, I doubled it. I multiplied by 2. So I do the same up top, and then that gives me 10. Then, how did I get from a denominator of 4 to 12? I had to multiply it by 3. So I must do the same to the numerator, and that gives me 9. And then I can subtract them. 10 twelfths minus 9 twelfths gives me 1/12. So Carla's plant grew 1/12 of an inch more than Megan's. I will also accept an answer of 2/24 or 3/36 because those are also equivalent fractions, and you may have a different answer if you use a different denominator and you didn't simplify. Number 7. So question number 7, Joan is making half of a cake recipe. The recipe calls for half a tablespoon of vanilla. How much vanilla does Joan need? So Joan is making this recipe for cake. She wants to use only half of the recipe. So obviously she doesn't want a big cake. So she only wants half of the size of the cake. So that means if she only wants half the recipe, that means she only needs half of each one of the ingredients. So if the recipe is calling for half a tablespoon of vanilla, I've got to figure out, well, she doesn't need the whole half because I know this is kind of confusing. She doesn't need the whole half of a tablespoon because that would be if she was making a whole cake. But she's not making a whole cake. She's only making half of a cake. So we've got to figure out, well, then what is half of a half? So if I'm looking at my picture here, so let's draw a little picture. So let's pretend this is the whole. So this is a whole cake. If she needed a whole cake, she would need half a tablespoon of vanilla. But she doesn't want the whole cake. She only wants to make half of a cake. Which means she doesn't need a half of a tablespoon. She only needs half of a half. So she only needs half of a half. And to find that, I just need to actually multiply. So I need to find, well, what is 1/2 of 1/2? Or what is 1/2 times 1/2? So to do my multiplication, I multiply my numerators together. And then I multiply my denominators together. 1 times 1 gives me 1. 2 times 2 gives me 4, which means if she wants to make only half the cake, she needs 1/4 of a tablespoon of vanilla. All right, let's look at number 8. So number 8 says, a parallelogram has a base of 4 inches and a height of 12 inches. What is the area of the parallelogram in square inches? So again, they're asking me what is the area, and I know it's a parallelogram, and they've told me the base is 4 and the height is 12. So we've learned in class that to find the area of a parallelogram, you're simply going to use the formula base times height. Well, they've told me that the base is 4 and the height is 12. Which means that the area would have to be 48. So my area is 48, and the unit was inches. So it'll be 48 inches square, or square inches. All right, question number 9 is the one about Jean and the bags with the fish. So this was kind of a wordy problem. Jean bought 12 bags of tropical fish, so I know that's probably going to be important. There were 7 fish in each bag. 7 fish in each. She put an equal number of fish in each of her 6 fish tanks. Which expression shows how many fish will be in each tank? So I'm looking for an expression that's talking about basically how did she figure out how many fish she needs to put in each tank? Well, we know that she has 12 bags that she bought from the store. And inside each bag, she's got 7 fish. And so that tells me if I wanted to do that, there's 12 bags with 7 in each bag. So I can basically show that as multiplication because it's 12 bags and each bag has 7. So that'd be 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7, or I can just show it as 12 times 7. And then it says she's going to put an equal number of fish in each of her 6 tanks. So an equal number means that she's basically going to split them into equal groups. So that tells me that she's going to now take the fish that she has and she's going to start dividing them. And she's going to divide them into 6 tanks. So that gives me the expression 12 times 7 divided by 6. So when I come back over to the front, I'm looking for which expression is 12 times 7 divided by 6, and I see that goes with C. So my answer is C. All right, number 10. I have a polygon, and I'm finding the area of the polygon. So we learned this in class, and we learned that you cannot find the area of this shape by just multiplying the base times the height or the length times the width, because this is a polygon, and it's an irregular polygon. It's not a rectangle or a square. It's multiple shapes kind of put together to make a new shape. So that means I'm going to have to break it up. So I've got to break it into shapes or pieces that I know. So this is a good spot. I'm going to break it right here, which means I'm breaking this bottom piece away. And I've got this parallelogram here, or rectangle, and this one here. So for each shape, I need to know the base and I need to know the height. So when I start with this very first rectangle, I have to figure out what's the base of it and what's the height. Well, they've given me the height here, which is 9, but they didn't tell me the base. So I got to figure that out. Well, I know the base of the whole shape is 10. And then if I look up here, the base of the rectangle that's laying on its side is 6. So if the two shapes together had a base of 10 and this rectangle has 6, that means what's left over has to be the other rectangle, which would be 4. So that means the first rectangle has a base of 4. So that means I can find the base times height now of the first rectangle by doing 9 times 4, which gives me 36. So the first rectangle has an area of 36. So the next step is to find the area of the second rectangle, which is the one laying on its side like this. And I need to figure out what's the base and what's the height. Well, I don't use the 10 anymore because the 10 is the base for the whole thing. But for this particular rectangle, the base is 6 and the height is 2. So again, I'm going to do base times height by doing 6 times 2. And then that gives me 12. And now I'm going to add them together, which gives me a total of 48, and it's centimeters, so it's going to be 48 centimeters squared. All right, hopefully this gave you some clarity on some of the questions for the week 4 review. And remember, you're going to use this for week 4, 5, 6, and this time you're also going to use it for week 7. All right.